What evil prank have you pulled off? Over a decade ago I worked in the warehouse of a guitar center. We dealt with inventory, shipping and receiving. We had a dumpster behind the store in a shared parking lot that people would leave random things in even though it was not a public dumpster. One day we found a broken beach chair in an open cardboard box. The box had a shipping label on it. It was left in such a way that it was easy to assume that the chair box combo was left by the same person. We packed the beach chair in another box and shipped it back to the customer. I wish I was there to see the person's face when they received their trash back via UPS. Haha, I did something similar, but nowhere near this epic. There is a used bookstore that I go to sometimes. This bookstore sells used postcards. I bought a few that had been previously sent 20-30 years prior. I then slapped a fresh stamp on them and tossed them into the mailbox. I wish I could have seen the people's reaction when they showed up. I lived in Korea for a bit. When my mom came to visit I told my Korean girlfriend it was an American custom to greet older women by touching elbows. I told my mom the same story about Korean customs. It was a thing of beauty. They were not pleased. Simple, elegant, thoughtfully harmless. The perfect prank. Early days of networked PCs. DOS and NetWare. I worked in a computer lab on campus. There weren't a lot of management utilities available at the time, so I and a few other student employees wrote batch scripts and small programs to automate a few things when a student or professor would log onto the network. Having that sort of access led to numerous pranks being pulled, but most of us were savvy enough to figure it out and undo the prank. However, we had two co-workers who liked to loaf a bit too much for our liking. They were not at all technical and had taken the lab assistant job because they thought it was easy money. They had conspired to be assigned to a remote classroom lab that rarely had any students in it who would need assistance. For most of their working hours, they would just sit around and play games on the PCs while the rest of us were, working. Clearly this could not stand. I rewrote a piece of code that was executed when every single user signed on. If the username was either one of these two and they were signing in on a PC in that remote classroom and it was during their working hours, it would look at an innocuous file on the network. The file merely had a few bytes in it which noted how long it had been since this prank had last been triggered, ensuring that it would run once or twice a week maximum. If it did activate, it would launch a terminate and stay resident program which would wait a random time between 5-15 minutes and then drop an image of two dudes 69ing on the monitor for a few seconds and reboot the PC. Tested it, put the compiled program in place and deleted the source. Much hilarity ensued for the next 2 semesters. Reminds me of one of the Monty Python games. You get on a computer and have to find some information. One of the icons brings up a goat dressed in red lingerie and pantyhose, disables the mouse and keyboard, and Eric Idle starts shouting something like, "Hey everyone, come see what this pervert is doing," through the speakers. I may or may not have done something similar. If anyone wants a copy of the source code, let me know. One night I replaced every framed object in my boss's office with a picture of me making a stern face. Posters, certificates, photos, etc. Took like 3 hours because he had like 30 framed things in his office. The next day I made sure I was out doing field work to make him sit with it most of the day. He had a lot of foot traffic to look at his office that day. I worked in an office that had 4 offices with shared partitions that had glass at the top. My neighbor wasn't the most observant person and kind of a dick, so I started printing random pictures like Nicolas Cage and setting them on my side of the office facing into his. He never noticed. It got to the point where everyone else in the office would check what photo I had set that week, but he never caught on. He knew. He just pulled a Stanley and collected his paycheck. I remember it like it was yesterday. At summer camp my cabin's leaders found a little snake that wasn't doing so well, so they decided to put it in an old terrarium in our cabin. A few of the guys were nervous about it, so the next day when the leaders decided the snake was well enough to release, I asked that they keep quiet about releasing it. When the other guys got back to the cabin and found no snake in the terrarium, chaos ensued. I thought my mom was cool with me having a pet snake. We went weeks without issue. So one night I'm letting it lay on my stomach while I watch TV, and at some point he decided to drop down and check out underneath the couch. His name was Breakfast. Kids are weird, and I say oh man. Breakfast is under the couch. My mom was sitting maybe 15 feet away in our little office space, and she jumps up on the desk chair and starts screaming about the loose snake. Breakfast wasn't allowed out for TV time much after that. How my mom had the same reaction to my noodle. I told her before I went on a week vacation that I was buying a snake when I came home. True to my word, I showed up with a pet snake after the trip. My mum was okay with him as long as she doesn't have to go near him. She would stand on the opposite side of the room until she realized ball pythons are literally the most docile snakes ever. I have gotten her to try and feed him a few times, with my dad's help. Apparently she speaks to him saying, "Here noodles. Want a yummy mouse? I have mouse for you. Noodless." I have also gotten her to hold his tail, but if he looks back at her it bets are off and she's back across the room. LOL. I don't know why she said it was okay for me to get him. I have noodles and a hognose now. She thinks the hoggy is cuter but hates her more because of the attitude. My mum's laptop wallpaper was a picture of her granddaughter. I copied the picture 100 times and made her wallpaper a slideshow of the same picture over and over again, so the file would change but nothing would change visibly on the monitor. The pictures would change every 10 seconds. On one of the images I painted a tiny little curly mustache on her, so randomly for 10 seconds my niece would have a mustache. My mum thought she was either losing her mind or had a computer virus, and every time the mustache popped up, it was gone by the time she tried to show anyone. Diabolical. I assume she's in an asylum now. There was a mustache, I swear. A mustache. One that was played on me. I took my SATs, college entrance exams, for those outside the US on the 1st of April. Should have known, right? But apparently, I'm not that smart. That night I went out with a group of friends, and when I got home my mom met me with a serious look on her face. She told me that the testing committee had called, that they had been an error and all test papers from that day were lost. Everyone was being contacted to schedule a date to retake the exam. She totally sold it. Face, reactions, everything. I bought a hook, line, and sinker, and she let me believe it until lunchtime the next day. My mom is a diabolical person. The fact that she let you believe it until the next day is evil. LOL. Working in a hot factory, supervisor and job planner in this enclosed cubicle with a window AC unit in the middle of the shop, aka nice 68 in there while we sweat our ass off in 95 110 F heat. Kinda hot and pissy and always flies around. I kept grabbing the flies alive, walking into the cubicle to ask a usually legit question or say I am just cooling off, and opening my hand behind my back. I put 14 of those fuckers in there in one shift. He never did catch on I was doing it, and the planner was pissed swatting around. There were so many flies in there. Supervisor was cleaning out every crevice thinking some food is supporting life now somewhere. You were planting bugs in their office. Catching flies with your bare hands is cool. Grabbing them alive is impressive. Not a prank I pulled off, but one I was victim to. My manager had left me in charge of the store when I was 16. Not legal, but that's a whole other mess. For a whole weekend. Saturday went well and I was happy with how I went, although my paranoid brain is always concerned about whether or not doors are actually locked. I'm the same with my house, but the store was worse. So I make my dad drive down to the store to double check that everything is okay. 15 minutes later I get a phone call from him saying, "Manager, and the police are here because the door was unlocked and people were inside." Cue to me on the floor in tears hyperventilating, while my dad is telling my mum, who had since picked up the phone, that he was only kidding and that everything was fine. Dude was harassing my ex because he used to have her cell phone number, was being a real fucking creep. Anyways, I created an email address, signed up to Kijiji and placed an ad offering an 80 inches 3D TV for free with some excuse about a bad breakup and not wanting her to get it. I asked people to only text or call. I then went to bed and forgot all about it until the next day at work. I get a text from my ex asking if I had done something on Kijiji. The dude was begging her to take the ad down and apologizing. I checked the email and there were 5 pages of responses even though I had told them not to email but to call or text. Dude's phone must have been ringing constantly. I took the ad down and she never heard from him again. I've done something similar. My friend called a for rent sign on a lawn and got yelled at by the guy who answered because she called after hours. It was like 6:30 PM. His online ads had strict instructions for when to call but his sign, obviously, said nothing. She was really rattled by it. She told me what happened the next day and I got really angry. I considered calling him and yelling at him but decided to hit him where it hurts. I made an ad on Craigslist for a free car which just needed a new battery. Put up a couple old Honda Civic pictures I found online and put instructions to please only call after 8 PM as I do shift work. Screw that guy. Got yelled at by the guy who answered because she called after hours. If it was after hours, why did he answer the phone? If his evening time is that precious, why waste it yelling at someone for calling? Imola, but old school, as in late 1970s, so the statute of limitations is passed. Worked in the local library as a teen, and some guy did something that passed off my co-worker and then best friend. So we started harvesting blow-in postcards from the magazine section, every magazine, and hand wrote the jerk's name and address on hundreds, at least, of postcards. Free subscription? Sure. Collectible plates? Yep. Columbia Records? Enjoy your free dozen Albanian opera records. Book of the month? Silver spoons? Travel offers? Cruises? Bring 'em all on. Do you know how many magazines libraries get, or got? Back then, The New Yorker, Sports Illustrated, Cosmo, Playboy, Reader's Digest, Car and Driver, Road and Track, National Geographic, Photography, Model Railroading, Science Fiction, every niche you can imagine. And we had 13 months or more of each. We'd grab a couple of cards or a dozen per shift, fill them out, and drop them in random mailboxes when we were out on our bikes. Took a couple months to kick in, and several more months for that tsunami to really hit. USPS stopped delivering to his house. Police were called, but the processing houses evidently didn't keep the postcards, and my prints weren't in the system yet anyway. We stopped after a Christmas break flurry until right before school started the following summer. One last blast of probably 50 more postcards with the most bizarre and offensive offers we could find. No one ever suspected us. I used to work at a science tutoring center when I was in college and my gap year before professional school. One of the things we taught very often was anatomy, so naturally we acquired a few skeletons and various skulls with some variation in how they looked or were marked, etc. Well, I was closing one night, and I knew my co-worker was opening the next morning early, so before I locked up I assorted all of the skeletons and skulls in a welcome party near the front door. I had one immediately at the opening of the only door into the room with several backup skeletons and skulls just behind at a table together watching on. The best part was that you have to turn on the lights manually and that switch is immediately to the side of the door opening. So when she reached down to turn on the lights she had to come face to face with some lifeless skeleton skull in the middle of the shady opening. Needless to say she screamed. And it was loud enough to make our boss come to see if she was okay. Woke up to some colorful texts LMAO. Still proud of that one, honestly. Please tell me this welcome party was a bunch of skeletons in dirty sex positions. Hahaha, no, just all of them staring at the opening of the door. Thank you for watching and listening to my channel. Feel free to drop a comment and be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification button for the latest video I publish every day. See you on the next video, very Reddit fans.